Hey there, my amazing subscribers. You asked for a video on the Burpsuite tool for hacking websites, and today, I'm delivering. I'm going to break it down so simply that even a 5-year-old could follow along. So, let's dive in and get started on this fun and exciting journey into the world of web hacking. But before we start, let's clear something up. Please stop saying this is AI or some other nonsense. If AI could make videos like this, I'd stop making video. I'm just sharing what I know and what I've learned through research. So, stop this shit. And always ensure you have permission to test any web application you work with to avoid legal issues. Okay, now let's start by understanding what Burpsuite is. Burpsuite is a collection of tools designed to test the security of web applications. It helps security testers with everything from mapping a website to finding and exploiting vulnerabilities. This guide will walk you through how to use Burpsuite in different scenarios and make the most of its features. Alright, let's talk about downloading Burpsuite. First things first, head over to the download page, which you can find on description. On this page, you'll see two options, Professional and Community Editions. Now, the Community Edition used to be called the Free Edition, so if you come across both terms online, they're referring to the same thing. I think the Professional Edition costs $399, but for our purposes, we don't need to shell out any cash. The Community Edition is packed with features, so go ahead and download that one. Their website guide is fantastic, honestly. I could almost skip explaining Burpsuite myself because of how comprehensive their resources are. If you're using Kali Linux like us, you're in luck. Burpsuite is already there, so no need to download it separately. Easy peasy. Okay, now let's set up our web app pentesting lab. We're going to use the Broken Web Application, or BWA. BWA is an OWASP project that provides a virtual machine or VM loaded with various web applications that have known vulnerabilities. This setup lets you learn about web application security, practice attacks, and use tools like Burpsuite. To follow along with this video, we'll be using the OWASP BWA VM. You can download it from the link provided in the description. Once you've downloaded it, extract the files. Next, open your virtual machine software. Whether you're using VMware or VirtualBox, the process is similar. I'll be using VMware Workstation. Open VMware, then click on File and select Open, or just press Ctrl+O. Navigate to the directory where you extracted the Broken Web Application files. In my case, I'm already in the BWA directory. Select the BWA VM file and open it. Now we're almost ready to go, but let's check the settings. Click on Edit Virtual Machine Settings. Go to the Network Adapter tab and make sure it's set to Host Only. This is important for our setup, but if you have networking knowledge, you can do it whatever you want. For now, just follow along and set it to Host Only. Click OK to save your settings. And that's it. We're all set to start using the Broken Web Application for our pentesting practice. Now let's start the virtual machine. Wait until the Broken Web Application system is fully booted, which may take a few minutes. After the booting process is complete, you should see the following screen. However, the IP address shown will be different for your machine. Now open Kali Linux and then launch the Firefox browser. Using Firefox on your Kali Linux machine, enter the URL provided. Make sure to replace the IP address with the one specific to your machine. In your browser, you'll see an index page with links to various vulnerable web applications. These applications will be our targets throughout this video. Now let's start Burpsuite in Kali Linux. It's as simple as always. Open a terminal as root. Type Burpsuite and hit enter. It might take a moment to load, so just be patient. Once it's loaded, click Next. Then click Start Burp. Now we've successfully opened Burpsuite. Don't panic if you see a lot of tabs. We'll go through everything step by step. But now, let's talk about something important. Burpsuite is described as an intercepting proxy. This means Burp sits between your web browser and the application's web server, capturing all the traffic flowing between them. This is known as a proxy service. Penetration testers use intercepting proxies like Burp to capture and analyze traffic between a web browser and a web application. For example, a tester can pause an HTTP request, modify its parameters, and then send the modified request to the web server. Burp allows testers to intercept both HTTP requests and responses, which helps in observing the web application's behavior under different conditions. Sometimes, these behaviors are unintended and can reveal vulnerabilities. To see Burpsuite in action, we need to configure our Firefox browser's network settings to point to our running instance of Burp. This setup will enable Burp to capture all HTTP traffic between your browser and the target web application. Here are the steps to configure Firefox to capture all HTTP traffic using Burpsuite. Open the Firefox browser and go to Options, then click Settings. In the General tab, scroll down to the Network Settings section, and then click Settings. In the Connection Settings window, select Manual Proxy Configuration and enter the IP address 127.0.0.1 with port 8080. The Burp proxy service is listening on 127.0.1 port 8080. Either of these settings can be changed to listen on an alternative IP address or port number. However, for the purpose of learning, we will use the default settings. Check the box that says, "Use this proxy server for all protocols." Make sure the No Proxy for text box is blank, as shown in the video, and then click OK. Now your Firefox browser is set up to route all HTTP traffic through Burpsuite, allowing you to capture and analyze it. If you don't see any traffic, it might be because proxy intercept is holding up the request. This could mean that the intercept is off in Burpsuite. Let me show you what I mean. Open Burpsuite and go to the Proxy tab. If you see that intercept is off, just click it to turn it on. For example, let's reload the website. This will send a request to Burpsuite. After doing this, the traffic should start flowing into Burpsuite like this. Congratulations! You now have Burp listening to all of your browser traffic. Now let's get to know the Burpsuite tools. This section will give you an overview of the most commonly used tools within Burpsuite. We'll start by setting the target scope within the target sitemap. Next, we'll introduce the message editor. Then, we'll dive into some hands-on exercises using OWASP Mutility Roman 2 to get familiar with proxy, repeater, decoder, and intruder. Let's get started. Now that we have traffic flowing between your browser, Burpsuite, and the OWASP BWA virtual machine, we can begin setting the scope of our test. For this example, we'll use the OWASP Mutility Roman 2 link available in the OWASP BWA VM as our target application. In Burpsuite, go to the Target tab. You'll notice 3 subtabs: Sitemap, Issue Definition, and Scope. From the initial proxy setup between your browser, Burpsuite, and the web server, you should now see some URLs, folders, and files listed in the Target Sitemap tab. This might seem overwhelming, but setting the scope for our project will help us focus our attention better. In the Target Sitemap tab, find the URL for Mutility Roman 2. Right-click on the URL and select Add to Scope. Go to the Target Scope tab to verify that the URL is now part of your defined scope. By setting the scope, we can better organize our testing and focus specifically on the Mutility application within the OWASP BWA VM. Okay, now first things is first. Let's talk about the message editor. Okay, here we are in Burpsuite. First, let's look at an HTTP request. I've captured a request using the proxy tool, and I've got it open in the message editor. Right at the top, we see the request line. This tells us the method, like GET or POST, the URL, and the HTTP version. Below that, we have the headers. These include things like host, user agent, accept, and content type, basically, metadata about the request. And if it's a POST or PUT request, we'll see a body section where the data being sent to the server is. In the text view, you can click and type directly to change things simple and fast. If you need to go deeper, there's a hex view. Here, you can see and edit the request in hexadecimal format, which is great for low-level inspection. Check out the Inspector tab too. It lets you edit headers, parameters, and cookies separately. This makes it really easy to tweak specific parts of the request without messing up the rest. Now, let's switch gears and look at an HTTP response. I've got one captured here. At the top, we have the status line, which shows the HTTP version and the status code like 200 OK or 404 not found. Below that, we've got headers, just like in the request. These tell us things like the content type and length, and any cookies set by the server. The body of the response is where the actual content lives: HTML, JSON, images, you name it. Editing responses is pretty similar to requests. We have the text view for direct edits and the hex view for a more detailed look. But there's also a render view, which is really cool. This shows you how the HTML content would look in a browser. Now we're going to explore how to use the repeater tool in Burpsuite. Repeater is incredibly useful for sending repeated HTTP requests with modifications to see how a web server responds. Let's get started. First things first, let's capture an HTTP request using the proxy tool. I've got a request here that I intercepted. Now, to send this request to Repeater, I'll right-click on the request in the Proxy tab and select Send to Repeater. Now, let's head over to the Repeater tab. Here we see our captured request. The interface is pretty straightforward. On the left, you have the request, and on the right, you have the response. Let's take a closer look at the request side. Just like in the message editor, you can see the request line at the top, followed by the headers, and then the body if there is one. We can make any modifications we want here. For example, let's change a parameter value. Suppose we're testing a login form. We can tweak the username and password fields to see how the server responds to different credentials. Once you've made your changes, click the Send button. This will send the modified request to the server, and the response will appear on the right side. This response is just like what you'd see in the message editor, with all the headers and the body content. Repeater also allows you to work with multiple requests at the same time. You can open a new tab within Repeater and send another request there. This is useful if you're testing different parts of an application simultaneously. Just click the plus icon at the top to open a new tab and repeat the process. Another handy feature is the ability to save your requests and responses. This is great for documentation, or if you need to share your findings with your team. Just right-click on the request or response and choose Save Item. You can save it as a file and open it later. So, to sum up, the Repeater tool in Burpsuite is essential for manually testing web applications. It allows you to send modified HTTP requests repeatedly, analyze responses, and gain a deep understanding of how the server behaves. Whether you're testing input validation, session management, or any other aspect of a web application, Repeater gives you the control and flexibility you need. Alright, let's talk about Burp Decoder. Burp Decoder is a super useful tool that lets you convert raw data into encoded data and vice versa. It supports a bunch of formats like URL encoding, HTML encoding, base64, binary code, hashed data, and more. Plus, it has a built-in hex editor. So, during a web penetration test, you might come across some encoded values. Burp makes decoding these values a breeze. You can send the encoded value to Decoder and try out different decoding functions to see what you get. Let's try decoding a session token, specifically the PHPS ESCD, found in the OWASP BWAVM. When a user gets assigned a PHPS ESSID cookie, it looks like it's encrypted and then wrapped in base64 encoding. We'll use Decoder to unwrap it. First, find the HTTP request you just generated. Go to the Proxy tab and then the HTTP history. Highlight the PHP CSSID value, not the parameter name. Right-click and hit Send to Decoder. Next, head over to the Decoder tab. In Decoder, use the Decode As. Drop down and choose Base64. You'll see the results in the hex editor. In this case, the unwrapped value is still encrypted, so we can't decode it further. But we've confirmed it was wrapped in Base64. And there you have it. This shows how you can use Decoder to manipulate and understand encoded values during your testing. Pretty cool, right? Now we're going to dive into using the Intruder tool and Burpsuite to test a login page. We'll explore the different types of attacks and show you how to configure them. First, let's capture an HTTP request using the proxy tool. Here, we have a login request that we intercepted. To send this request to Intruder, simply right-click on it and select Send to Intruder. Now, let's head over to the Intruder tab. You'll see 4 main sections here: Positions, Payloads, Resource Pool, and Settings. Let's go through each one. In the Positions tab, you define which parts of the request you want to attack. Burpsuite automatically highlights potential parameters with section symbols, but you can adjust these. For our login page, we want to highlight the password fields. To do this, select the text you want to target and click Add Section. We'll add markers around the password field. These markers tell Intruder where to insert the payloads. If Burpsuite automatically highlights parameters, remove if you don't want it. Intruder offers 4 main types of attacks: Sniper, Battering Ram, Pitchfork, and Cluster Bomb. Each one is useful in different scenarios. Sniper is used when you want to test one parameter at a time. It's great for identifying which specific input might cause an issue. For example, if you want to test different usernames while keeping the password constant, Sniper is the way to go. We'll use the Sniper attack type because we're testing one parameter, the password. Battering Ram uses the same payload set for all positions. This is useful when you want to send the same input to multiple fields. Imagine you suspect that both the username and password fields might be vulnerable to the same injection attack. Battering Ram will help you test this hypothesis. Pitchfork allows you to use multiple payload sets, each corresponding to a specific position. It's useful for testing combinations of inputs. Cluster Bomb is similar to Pitchfork, but tests all possible combinations of multiple payload sets. This is ideal for exhaustive testing of all input permutations. Now, let's move to the Payloads tab. Here, we define the data that Intruder will insert into the marked position. Intruder offers various payload types, each useful in different scenarios. Let's go through the main ones. Simple List. A simple list payload is exactly what it sounds like, a list of predefined values. This is useful when you have a set list of potential passwords to try. Runtime File. The runtime file payload type allows you to load payloads from a file at runtime. This is useful for large lists that might change between tests. Select Runtime File and specify the file path. This way, Intruder reads the payloads directly from the file during the attack. Numbers. This payload type generates numbers within a specified range. It's useful for testing numerical parameters or pins. For example, if you're testing a pin field, you can set the range from 0 to 9999. Select Numbers and configure the range, step, and format. Brute Forcer. The Brute Forcer payload type generates payloads by iterating over a character set. It's perfect for testing all possible combinations of a certain length. For testing short passwords, you can set the character set like lowercase letters and specify the length. Select Brute Forcer and configure these options. Data time. Generates payloads based on date and time values. Useful for testing date inputs or timestamps. You can specify the start date, end date, and format. Select Data time and configure these options accordingly. Illegal Unicode. Generates payloads with illegal Unicode characters. Useful for testing how an application handles unusual or potentially dangerous input. Select Illegal Unicode and configure the options based on your testing needs. Custom Iterator. Creates payloads by iterating over multiple lists in a customized way. Useful for complex testing scenarios. Configure the custom iterator by specifying multiple lists and defining how they should be combined. For our login test, we'll use the simple list payload type. We'll load a list of common passwords. Click on Payload Set 1, select Simple List, and then click Load to upload your list of passwords or by typing them directly into the list. This is the most straightforward way to test multiple passwords against the admin username. Payload processing is useful when configuring special rules to be used while Intruder substitutes payloads into payload marker positions. For this recipe, we do not need any special payload processing rules. Payload encoding is applied to the payload value prior to sending the request to the web server. Many web servers may block offensive payloads, so the encoding feature is a means to circumvent any blacklist blocking. For the purpose of this recipe, leave the default box checked. Now in the Resource Pools tab, an important feature in Burpsuite's Intruder tool. Resource pools allow you to manage the allocation of resources for intruder attacks, which is crucial when performing large-scale or high-intensity testing. Now, let's check out the Settings tab. This is where you configure the details of the attack. You can set the number of threads to control how many requests are sent simultaneously, adjust the request engine settings for speed, and configure how Intruder handles response updates. There are several sections within the Intruder Setting tab, including request headers, request engine, attack results, grep match, grep extract, grep payloads, and redirections. Request headers offers configurations specific to header parameters while Intruder is running attacks. For the purpose of this recipe, leave the default boxes checked. It is just error handling. Okay, after starting the attack, Intruder creates an attack table. The attack results section offers some settings around what is captured within that table. For the purpose of this recipe, leave the default settings as is. Grep match is a highly useful feature that, when enabled, creates additional columns in the attack table results to quickly identify errors, exceptions, or even a custom string within the response. For the purpose of this recipe, leave the default settings as is. Grep extract, when enabled, is another option for adding a column in the attack table whose label is specific to a string found in the response. This option differs from grep match, since grep extract values are taken from an actual HTTP response, as opposed to an arbitrary string. For the purpose of this recipe, leave the default settings as is. Grep payloads provides a tester the ability to add columns in the attack table in which responses contain reflections of payloads. For the purpose of this recipe, leave the default settings as is. Redirections instructs Intruder to never, conditionally, or always follow redirections. This feature is very useful, particularly when brute forcing logins, since a 302 redirect is generally an indication of entry. For the purpose of this recipe, leave the default settings as is. Okay, now leave it all as it is. Once everything is set up, it's time to start the attack. Click on the Start Attack button at the top. Burpsuite will begin sending the requests with the payloads you configured, and you'll see the results in real time. Switch to the results to monitor the attack's progress. Here, you can see each request and its corresponding response. Burp highlights potential interesting responses based on the criteria you set in the Options tab. For our login example, we might be looking for responses that are different from the typical login failed message. These could indicate successful logins or different error messages, giving us valuable insights. Analyzing the results is crucial. You can sort and filter the responses to quickly identify outliers. For example, sort by status code or response length to spot anomalies. You can also double-click on any result to see the full request and response in the message editor, allowing you to inspect the details. Looking at response, render within the attack table allows us to see how the web application responded to our payload. As you can see, we are successfully logged in as an admin. So, to sum up, the Intruder tool in Burpsuite is essential for automated security testing. It allows you to systematically send different inputs to a web application, helping you uncover vulnerabilities like SQL injection, cross-site scripting, and more. By carefully configuring your attack and analyzing the results, you can gain deep insights into the security posture of your web application. Now let's talk about establishing trust over HTTPS. Since most websites implement Hypertext Transport Protocol Secure or HTTPS, it is beneficial to know how to enable Burp to communicate with such sites. HTTPS is an encrypted tunnel running over Hypertext Transport Protocol, or HTTP. The purpose of HTTPS is to encrypt traffic between the client browser and the web application to prevent eavesdropping. However, as testers, we wish to allow Burp to eavesdrop, since that is the point of using an intercepting proxy. Burp provides a root certificate authority signed certificate. First, make sure Burpsuite is running and you have your browser set up to use Burp as the proxy. As it is, we can't go to HTTPS website, you can check it. So let's set up it. Now, let's open Firefox. We need to download the Burpsuite certificate authority certificate so Firefox can trust the traffic Burpsuite is intercepting. In Firefox, go to the URL http://Burpsuite. You'll see a Burpsuite page with several options. Look for the CA certificate link and click on it to download the certificate. Next, we need to import this certificate into Firefox. Click on the menu button in the upper right corner of Firefox, the three horizontal lines, and select Settings. In the Settings tab, scroll down to the Privacy and Security section. Here, you'll find a subsection titled Certificates. Click on the View Certificates button. The Certificate Manager window will pop up. Here, we'll add the Burpsuite Certificate Authority certificate. Go to the Authorities tab, which is where certificate authorities are listed. Click on the Import button. This will open a file dialog. Navigate to the location where you downloaded file and select it. Firefox will ask you to confirm the import. Make sure to check the option Trust this certificate authority to identify websites, then click OK. To ensure everything is set up correctly, you can visit an HTTPS site, such as Google, while Burpsuite is running and intercepting traffic. If everything is configured correctly, Burpsuite should be able to intercept the HTTPS traffic without any certificate warnings from Firefox. If you encounter any issues, here are a few troubleshooting tips. Make sure Burpsuite is running and set as the proxy in Firefox's network settings. Double-check that you imported the correct certificate and that it is marked as trusted for identifying websites. Ensure there are no other conflicting proxy settings or extensions in Firefox that might interfere with the connection. And that's it. You've successfully added the Burpsuite HTTPS Certificate Authority certificate to Firefox. Now you can intercept and analyze HTTPS traffic with Burpsuite, making your security testing much more effective. If you've stuck with me until now, watching this video, let me share one last tip with you. Before we end, I want to emphasize the importance of practicing with Burpsuite. You might be wondering, how do I practice? Well, my friend, here's what you need to do. Head over to the Portswigger website. I'll put the link in the description for you. Once you're there, navigate to the Academy section. Scroll down a bit and click on View All Labs. Here, you'll find a treasure trove of labs covering every kind of web vulnerability. These labs are designed to let you practice on your own while teaching you how to identify and exploit vulnerabilities effectively. It's an excellent resource for honing your skills and getting hands-on experience with Burpsuite. So go ahead, dive into those labs, and start practicing. The more you practice, the better you'll get. Alright, I hope you now have a solid understanding of Burpsuite and its potential. There's so much you can do with it in the realm of web application security. Whether you're testing for vulnerabilities, decoding encrypted data, or exploring authentication schemes, Burpsuite is an incredibly powerful tool. If you're interested, I can create videos on every type of website hacking using Burpsuite. We can dive deeper into various techniques and tools to enhance your skills. For now, go ahead and download OWASP BWA, start exploring, and see what you can discover. The best way to learn is by doing, so get your hands dirty and practice hacking in a safe environment. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Your support means a lot and helps me create more content for you. Happy hacking, and I'll see you in the next video.